Okay, so today we're going to talk about plants and animal cells, the cell wall, cell membrane, and the nucleus. So if we look at the cell, we have a plant and animal cell. And when we're talking about multicellular organisms, in a plant cell, you have the cell wall, which is this dark green line. Then you have the cell membrane, which is right inside the cell wall. Both of those are semi-permeable, meaning they will allow certain things in and out through here. There are pores in these two linings, this cell wall and the cell membrane. There are also pumps that allow things to move in and out of the cell. We'll talk about those later. A plant cell has a cell wall where an animal cell doesn't. A plant cell has a large vacuole where an animal cell doesn't. And then they also have chloroplasts, which an animal cell doesn't. The chloroplasts are what allows the plant to obtain the energy from the sun and convert it into energy it can use. The animal cell is going to have a cell membrane, not a cell wall. And it's going to have more mitochondria because it does need a lot of energy. When we talk about the cell wall, it's a tough, rigid outer covering. You'll see a picture of it over here. There's a rigid covering. It's going to protect the cell and give it shape. That's why it has that kind of squarish shape. A lot of things like plants, algae, fungi, and most bacteria are enclosed in a cell wall. Cells are mostly made up of cellulose, which means lose means sugar. It's made up of sugar and carbohydrates. Cellulose is like long, thin fibers, like a mesh. So when I think about this, I think about an example of like this, when you break your celery and the little strings that you sometimes have. That's what I think of cellulose looking like. Cellulose allows water and dissolved materials to pass through it, so you can have movement through the cell wall and the cell membrane. Cell wall can contain pectin, and pectin is like what's in jam and jelly. It gives it that kind of bouncy texture. When we talk about the cell membrane, if cells have cell walls and cell membrane inside of it, it would be the plant cell would have both the cell wall and the cell membrane is right inside. The cell membrane regulates what goes in and out of the cell. Water moves in and out. Particles of food move in and out. Waste moves in and out. And the cell membrane also separates the inside from the outside. It's a protective covering. Selectively permeable means it controls what's allowed to move in and out of the cell. So if it's too big, can't fit through the pores, it can't be allowed in. And vice versa. It can't be allowed out either if it's too big. And it also consists of a phospholipid bilayer. This phospholipid bilayer is proteins embedded, and you're going to see that they're thin membrane made up of a fat, 2 layers of fat. And we're going to see that here. Here's the 2 layers of the phospholipid bilayer. The fat's in the middle, and the water's on the inside and on the outside. The head's like water, the tail's like fat. So they line up 2 rows. Here's 1 layer, here's the second layer. And we'll talk about that more. The cytoplasm is like gelatin. Again, this is like jelly. It has that kind of a squishy texture, and it allows those organelles to be suspended within the framework. So it also gives shape to the cell. Amoebas have cytoskeleton instead of having any kind of structure that allows them to form shape because they're able to extend their cytoplasm to engulf their food or to move. And these cytoskeletons are made of thin, hollow proteins and make solid fibers. Proteins are made up of organic molecules, amino acids, which are the building blocks of life. And most cells occur, and most of the processes that occur within a cell are occurring in the cytoplasm, which means it's occurring inside the cell in all that gooey liquid that you have within all those organelles. Things move in and out, being transported. We'll talk about that later. It's like a small factory. Organelles are very complex in the cytoplasm of an eukaryotic cell, which means you. Single-celled organisms just have a basic 3 kinds of things: DNA, cytoplasm, and a cell membrane. Organelles have multiple functions. We'll talk about those in a moment, but they're also surrounded by membranes, some of them, most of them. The nucleus is the largest organelle in the animal cell. The largest organelle in a plant is a central vacuole, and we just talked about the vacuole being the largest in a plant. The nucleus is in charge of the activities in the cell. It's the brains of the operation, right? It's what tells everything, hey, this is your job, your job, your job, go do it. And they're the ones controlling the cell, like the brain. So cytoplasm allows for things to move in and out of the cell, like we talked about, through the pores of the cell membrane. You also have a membrane that surrounds the nucleus that again allows things in and out. The nucleus contains instructions called DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. So keep that in mind, that DNA is what makes you you, what your parents passed on to you, 50-50. The nucleolus is found within the nucleus where you actually have the stored DNA. It's kind of a double barrier protection to keep things safe because the DNA is the most important part of the cell that cannot be destroyed or altered. You don't want to lose that. We're going to stop there for today.